Hey, you're riding home one night, your lights start getting dim, you stop for some gas, the bike won't restart. Is the problem in the battery? Is it something in the charging system? Well, we don't know for sure till we test it. That's the topic of this Southern Biker TV how-to. Now, if you've been keeping up with the saga, you have probably seen the video reports of where I got stranded about 40 miles from home one night, coming back from South Florida. Lights started getting dim, started losing electrical power, stopped for a pit stop, would not restart, and I had to tow her home. Now, the question becomes, is it the battery? Is it something in the charging system? Or is it a wiring connection somewhere between the two? And that's what we need to find out. So before we get started, real quick rundown on this particular bike. It's 98 Softtail with the Evo engine. It uses a two-wire alternator, and there's two parts to that. There's a stator, that's the windings, the wire, and then there's a rotor, that's a permanent magnet. So as the magnet spins around that wire, it creates electricity, and that's what feeds the battery through the regulator, voltage regulator assembly. So any one of those components could be at fault, but the very first thing I want to do is a basic system test to get an idea, is it charging or is it not charging? Is the battery okay? Is it healthy? We went ahead and charged it up, so I know that it's got a full charge on it right now. And let's go ahead and run that test first. Okay, the first step that we need to do is check the overall condition of the system, and we're going to start right here. This is the battery. It's a 12-volt system. The battery was drained to nothing, charged it up, and now it's at a full charge, so we can test it, get a gauge of its health, and see if the charging system's doing its job. Okay, we're going to start off with a voltmeter, and you can get a variety of models from your local parts store. This is a good one from UEI. I'm going to set it to the voltage scale. I have my leads in the correct positions here. Then we're going to turn it on. And we're going to hook up the leads to the battery. Okay, make sure we have good connections. Okay, that's a good reading for a charged battery, 12.6. That's what I want to see. If I see a lot less than that, even not so much less than that, 12.4 would be significantly undercharged. We'd have to charge it up before we could do a good test. On this meter, I have a record function. I'm going to hit the record, and then I'm going to go ahead and crank the bike. .72 would be what we call loaded voltage. That's what the battery has still got left in it when I've put the starter demand on it. Rule of thumb is 9.5. This is not as good as I'd like to see it. You know, usually a good healthy battery will stay up around 10 volts or more. So while this one is getting some wear and tear on it, it's not bad, but might not be a bad idea to go ahead and place it while I'm doing all the rest of this work. Hit the record button again for our max, and here you can see we're getting 12.34. This should be our charging voltage. This should be more around 13 to 14 volts. So now I know the problem is in the charging system, not the battery. The bike's alternator is hiding here behind the compensating sprocket. And wouldn't that be a bitch? We just took all that off to replace the primary chain. So we were right at this part not too long ago. The two-wire plug you see there, that's where the two stator wires are coming out of the primary and on up to the regulator assembly. There's two more wires in the regulator. One is the ground, and the other is the feed back to the battery. Okay, the next step I'm going to do is check the output from that stator, that AC stator that we talked about. Is it putting anything out? And there's a couple of things I could do here. I could check the resistance using the ohm meter function, or I can just check directly to see what the AC output is. Now the spec on this is 30 to 40 volts, I believe, at 2,000 RPM. So before I test for that, I need to change this to the AC volt scale, and then put the leads, unplug the alternator, and then put the meter leads in the 2 holes where the wiring harness connects to the stator. Well, I don't know if you can see the meter, but we're only getting about, at most, 10 volts out of the stator, out of the alternator itself. So I've got a problem in there. Not much I can do to repair it. I have to replace it. Now the question is, now for you techies out there, I also hooked up a digital storage oscilloscope to look at the output from both stator leads. Here's what that picture looked like. The blue trace is one side and the red trace is the other side. You can see where the red trace is significantly lower than the blue. That's what's impacting the overall output from the alternator. So there's no question I have to replace the stator, in the bike. What about the rotor? Well, that's a permanent magnet. If there's physical damage to it, yes, I'll replace it. If the overall output had been a problem, instead of the 2 differences that I saw in the scope pattern, then that might be a culprit, having lost magnetism, but I don't suspect there's an issue with the one on this bike. The voltage regulator assembly seems to be working, but I don't know how long it's been on the bike, number 1. Number 2, the connection between the regulator plug and the stator plug is not as tight as I'd like to see it. So I think that's a good reason to replace that as well.